Hey guys, I hope you're well. You're joining me today on the Talkwoods. Today's show is going to be about codependency and shame. And I've got two people here, both of which I've never actually met in the physical, but this is the first time I've ever met Jocelyn. And basically, what I was doing was I was with Patrick a short while ago when we were doing a podcast. Then I decided to do some more stalking about what other guests he's had since me. And then I found this legend who's in between us right now. And I thought, oh, this would be good. And then he's got loads of other guests as well that he's got. So I basically said, Patrick, why don't you and me do a show? And then we can get on your guests and go deeper down the rabbit hole of conversations. And this is what we're doing. So we're here. So welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. Jocelyn, you are, I don't know where you are right now. Where are you in the world?
Me? I am in Colorado, outside of Denver, Colorado, and kind of smack in the middle of the United States. And fortunately, now it's warmed up because we were just talking about this beforehand. It was minus 4 Fahrenheit. So I don't know if that's like, I don't even know. Way minus for you guys. Celsius. It was bitter cold.
Yeah.
It's now warming up. The sun is shining and life is returning to normal-ish, as normal as can be amidst Corona 2.0.
Yeah, it's a strange time that we're living in at the moment. So the cold is actually a big event right now because it's pretty much all that happens. It's whether it's cold or hot, and there's nothing else that goes on. Or going to the bathroom's a big event these days. Or going to it's like there's not really much else to talk about other than the weather. So yes, don't worry, we're there with you. So I wanted to ask you like a little bit more detail about your background, kind of where you're from, and actually how you two met each other. I'll ask Patrick that in a second, but if you can tell me a little bit about your background, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So these days, I am a breakdown to wake up coach, and I work predominantly with men and women to bring forward their first book, much to how Patrick and I met. Working with people to help break through the BS of their life, the things that are holding them back. And oftentimes it's the stories of our childhood, of our past, that have formed who we are today, who we believe that we are today, and why we can't succeed, or why we're unworthy of deserving of the love or the affection or the financial gains or the friendships or the relationships or the bigness that we get to have in life, because we hold ourselves back based on these preconceived storylines that came along the pathway from our childhood, from those first 7 years of life. And the reason that I coach, and the reason that I'm writing, not only writing coaching, but coaching, doing life coaching as well, is because it's my own journey. And so about 4 years ago, when I moved here I'm in Colorado these days, but I grew up on the East Coast in a state called New Jersey in the U.S. And when about several months after moving to Colorado, filed for divorce. I had to make the move to Colorado. I actually walked away from a pretty predominant career. I was a senior leadership in a nonprofit and did some great stuff in there. But I walked away from that career to pursue the opportunity to reinvent our life. We were living in a small town. We owned a nice little business. I had a nice little career, but coming to Colorado provided us this opportunity to have more time outside. And we had a young son. Our son is 6 now, but he was 3 at the time. And we really wanted to have the ability to play outside and be more close to nature. And in the process of the move, or shortly after the move, I had recognized a big void in my life and how truly unhappy I was. At the time, we owned a bike shop, and my ex-husband was flying back and forth to the East Coast. And I was home alone a lot. My son was in preschool, and I was recognizing how, there was this really empty space within me. And also how unhappy I was in my marriage. We'll talk about the codependency because that was a big part of my marriage.
Yeah.
So ended the marriage, and this thing is coming out. That's just what's going to happen, you guys. We're going to go 1 year and see how it goes. But in process of that and leaving the marriage, I worked with my first life coach and began my awakening. I didn't know what awakening was. If you had asked me this 4 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. All the things I've seen and done and experienced, it's been amazing. One of the biggest things was that I started to share very openly what I was going through, the highs and the lows, and everything in between, very publicly. And in doing so, was receiving a lot of feedback on Facebook about, wow, I'm so proud of you. Like, you're really busting through all of this stuff that you're working on. And my friend is going through this, my sister is going through this. She doesn't want to leave, she's terrified. And look, you're thriving. And that was really the birth. That was the precursor to birthing of the coaching. But before I even launched the coaching practice, I actually launched my first podcast called Leap, where I was interviewing entrepreneurs about what inspired them to take a leap of faith in starting a business, which was oftentimes breakdowns. They had breakdowns in their life and their breakdowns to breakthroughs. And so that became the theme of my work. And the book came through at the end of November. I wrote a compilation. Well, I have a compilation book. It was myself and 15 other authors, and that's how Patrick and I connected, because Patrick is one of those authors, where I invited people to come forward and share their personal journeys of breakdowns and who we are when we find ourselves in those journeys. And the lowest of lows, finding what the essence of our being. And that's become my brand. That's become what I talk about, because I think it's important that we share the shit. Because we all have it. Yeah, okay, I was the first one.
We were talking just before about swearing and whether who was going to be the first one. I think here we are. Not me today. Thank you very much. Dad's watching. I'll be like, see, it's not always me that drops it. He always says, do you have to swear? And I'm like, no, I just choose to sometimes because I enjoy it and it just slides out and it's perfect. So, but yeah, well, thank you very much for giving us a bit of a background on you. We're going to go more into that as well. And Patrick, what about your lovely self? Tell us a little bit more. I know I already know, but tell the viewers.
Well, my story kind of mirrors Jocelyn's. I was in a marriage that I was, by all extents, I was very happy. Like I'd followed all the rules of conventional society. I'd gone to school, I got good grades, I got a career, a house, a job, a wife and kids. And I was in a creative career and I'm a musician. So I had everything. But there was this sort of deep gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach that I wasn't living up to my fullest potential. I followed all the rules and I wasn't happy. On the deepest level, I wasn't fulfilled, and I knew, and that sort of knowing gnawed at my soul. And like I said on the last podcast, I was always looking outwards. I always was consuming knowledge and learning and reading. It's like I want to know everything about the universe. I never thought to look inward. And so
you're like, you didn't even know it existed.
I didn't even know it existed, right? And then I was just numbing my pain with alcohol. Alcohol was my big numbing out agent. It's like the dissonance within me was just overwhelming. And I wasn't an angry drunk. I wasn't a violent drunk. I was the happy guy. I was party Patty, you know? And so, but I got to a point where the alcohol was starting to affect me physically, emotionally, financially. And it's like, this cannot continue. And so once I started down that path, I'm like, okay, how do I get to the bottom of this? And I started looking inward. I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go. That's where all the answers are. But it's also, you have to sift through all the pain and the shit and the programming and the conditioning and stories, all that stuff to get to your deepest essence, your core essence, your highest self. And so that process that I've gone through myself is what I coach other people to do. Very similar to Jocelyn, just a different approach. Helping people find their essence, their truest self, and then from there start creating from that place rather than from the fear or the stories. And then how to use that to find your purpose and really make an impact in the world. So I do that. Yeah, that's what I do.
There's so many people now that have, a lot of people do have to go through some kind of big emotional challenge. I don't really know anyone that hasn't gone through a challenge who's on a kind of spiritual path, because it's essentially, it's what it is. It's a deepening of yourself. It's a deepening of your journey, taking a little bit more of a look and a care of things that would have just passed you by before. So you've got this different bit of awareness on your life, and you're like, oh, and you're seeing things for what they are. And we did the show the other day about what the fuck is a spiritual awakening, and I did just drop the F-bomb first. Damn. I'm proving my dad right. But I really value the fact that I did a show. This was one of my first ever radio shows where somebody was interviewing me, and she said to me, I said, oh yeah, I had a breakdown. And she went, I call them breakthroughs. And I was just like, oh my God, this was like 9 years ago. I was like, yes, that's the best way of describing what happened to me, because it was really hard, but it did break me through. I mean, I've had plenty of breakthroughs since then, that if you can call them, but this was the big significant one. I personally didn't have to, let's say, lose any relationship around it. I haven't been in a relationship for a very long time, But a lot of people who come onto this path, somebody has to leave their life in some way in order for something new to come, which is a hard thing to do. And there's so much codependency around that, because you're letting go of the comfortable situation that you had and you're going into the complete unknown, which is the brand new, what the hell's going on? No one told me I was going to end up here. What the fuck? And you're like, oh. And, you know, it's difficult because, you know, losing everything that you love for something that you want to be better, but you don't know what that better is like a very hard thing to let go of. So come on, I'll let you go for it.
Yeah, I want to tap on that, because I think what you're opening up there, Nat, is a real beautiful opportunity. This is something that I had learned. I think the hard way at first, that piece of letting go. But here's the beauty in this, is that part of the codependency is attachment to an outcome, to a person, to an idea, to a thought, to a feeling.
Yeah.
We attach ourselves to what we think we actually need. And if it doesn't meet our expectation in any of those formats, in any of those platforms, we then are disappointed. We are then facing anxiety, stress, disease, discomfort, just depression.
Resistance.
Yeah. And when we can break through that threshold of, I don't need to know the answer. I just need to know that I am here right now in this moment. I am safe. I am loved. I'm loved and carried by and when we go deeper into I'm loved and cared for by the universe, but I am loved because I love me.
Yeah.
No one else has to pour that into me, because I'm centered here. I'm okay with being open to whatever is.
Yeah, acceptance, isn't it? Which is the hardest thing. What did somebody say to me that I think it was a show. I don't know if it was on the show we were on, actually, Patrick. Somebody was talking about letting go. And I think they changed the words slightly and said it's not about letting go, it's about allowing. And when you say letting go, it's like, it's like a little stab. You're like, I don't want to let go. But if you just allow, it's just a slightly different word, but I think there was another word that he used as well. But allowing is, you know, you're just allowing whatever it is today to show up. Doesn't mean it's always going to be this way. It just means that right now, what it is happening. So any fight with resistance to what is, any fighting that you've got to not have the moment you're already in is crazy.
Yes, exactly.
Acceptance, just the acceptance and the allowing of that moment, even if it's
as well. But allowing is,
sorry,
you're just allowing whatever it is today to show up. Doesn't mean it's always going to be this way.
End of. Oh, there you go. That was the best way she thought to get out of that moment.
Pull the sheet.
I love that. That's brilliant. That's her allowing the situation. She's like,
perfect.
But you know, like before she comes back on, but for you, obviously with your marriage and stuff, what was the point where you thought this has to change? This has got to go?
Well, it wasn't my marriage that was the issue. And frankly, my wife was incredibly supportive of everything I was going through. It was my struggle. It was my struggle with myself, really. Oh, there she is.
There we go.
But another
I
word.
literally had a pizza delivery. I had my 6-year-old drop off pizza for me, and I don't know what happened. So I'm back. Sorry.
Right.
Real life, guys.
Yes, real life. Another word that I use is surrender. It's just surrendering to whatever is in that moment, whatever is present for you in that moment, because there's so much value. Like, I've had deep anxiety this week, and I've got no problem saying it. Like, I've some of the worst anxiety of my entire life in the last couple of days, you know, like what I would do previously is like, okay, I just have to get away from this. I have to push it away. I have to escape. Call up my buddies, let's go drinking, anything to not feel this right now.
Yeah.
But what I did is, and this is why a lot of people don't do it, is you just allow it to be there and just witness it and just be like, okay, I'm anxious as fuck. What is this? You get curious about it.
Yeah.
You know, and rather than pushing it away or trying to numb it out, just allow it to be there. And what happens is the wisdom of why it's there in the first place will come through.
Yeah.
And then also once you shine the light of your awareness on it, it tends to dissipate more quickly. And so if I'd gone out drinking and get up the next morning with a hangover, the anxiety is still going to be there 10 times worse.
Yeah.
Right. And so allowing whatever is there to be there, and then distilling the wisdom for why it's there in the first place.
Yeah.
I love that.
The magic, when you sit with it, when you're willing to sit with it,
but it hurts. It hurts like a motherfucker. So that's why most people don't do it.
There you go. Now you're in, Pat. Now you're in, Patrick. One for you.
Yeah, it does. And it's the tears that come with your path and with that actually surrendering. Like they're tears of a depth that you never knew you had. When you cry a deep, deep surrendering cry, letting go cry, whatever it is, that's a level of pain that no one taught you about at school. No one went, this is gonna hurt like hell, and you're like, yeah, right.
And let's take that one step further, Nat, because none of this, what we're talking about right now, none of this is talked about in school, and very little of it, I think, really is a conversation we have at all with our parents, with our friends, with the people that are raising us, because we talk about this conditioning factor, right? We are taught by our parents predominantly, or the community that we're surrounded by, which is usually influenced by our parents or whoever's raising us, who were influenced by the people that raised them. And we continue to take these storylines on. Well, this worked in this generation, so it's going to work in this generation. We're going to adapt it a little, but we're going to continue that piece of tradition of how we're meant to show up and how we're meant to be. Like Patrick, you kind of started with this, is like your marriage, for instance, and you and I he and I have had many a conversation around this, because I feel like we're such good mirrors for each other on how both of our relationships have showed up. But like, you did everything you were supposed to. You got the good job, you had the good grades, you got the good job, you had the beautiful marriage, you had the beautiful kids. So did I. And yet there was something aching inside that said, I can't, this path is not aligned with me. And it's, and we try to cover it up. Like, mine is food. I punish myself and still do this as I sit with a piece of pizza literally in front of me, guys, and I'm not going to eat it because it smells so good, but I'm not going to eat it. But we try to do these things to help avoid having to sit with the pain, because we're so easily touched to our pain body. We forget that we can really lean into our pleasure body and enjoy the opportunities, because it's touching both. It's touching the dark and touching the light, and being able to have both.
Have you heard of something? This has just dropped into my mind, and I haven't. I read the book. Have you heard of existential kink?
Ooh.
I don't know. I just started listening it on ebook last week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, for anybody out there that's interested in tapping into your pain and turning it into your pleasure, Existential Kink is a wicked book. I'd love to speak to the author, actually. But it's the idea that, we can really push into that pain to a point where it's pleasurable. We can actually get a kick out of our pain. And not in a sadistic way, but in a way where it's just, in terms of, I have to keep putting you on mute, by the way, just because of the background noise, but you can come back. But it's basically allowing ourselves to realize that the pleasure and the pain within our body are very, very close together. And it's, there's a reaction within the body that happens, that we can choose how we want to feel about the situations that we're in as well. If we can learn to start kind of handle it and go into that, we can get to a position where we can actually choose how we want to feel about this stuff, which sounds crazy because you feel like you're just engulfed with pain, but you can actually choose it to be a pleasure because you know what it can bring you, which is a really weird way of looking at it. And most people will be like, you sound like a crazy person. But honestly, this woman sold loads of books and she smashed it. But it's just a very interesting way of looking at it and taking pleasure from that darker place, because it is ultimately, it's the gold, it's the growth of where you're from. And I think when you can take your pleasure your pain that you've got, and you can turn it into some form of pleasure, especially when you have like a new relationship, when you have a new person to deal with. If somebody new comes into your life and you're bringing all of the pain that you once had into that relationship, that's not fair on the new relationship. And that's really where we can turn it into a pleasurable experience by allowing ourselves to share it in a different way with the new partner and go into it in a healthy way, which we can get more intimacy out of. So the pain from the past can become solid space of intimacy moving forward. So we've transformed it. The alchemy of that situation's happened by us dealing with it differently. Not that I have a relationship and that I'm doing this right now, but I've heard it.
Well, I'll jump on that. I'll take from that, because I will say that, so since I'm I don't know, about 3 years post-divorce now. And I was in a relationship for a year in 2019-ish. And in real life, I mean, that those things were coming through. He'd taken action that felt very mirroring to what I had experienced in past relationships. Now having started, having awoken and having a more conscious relationship, having the conversation saying, hey, you took this action, you said this thing, it triggered a past memory inside of me. I know you are not him. I don't believe that the expectation or the outcome of this is going to be exactly what it was in the past. But it's my responsibility for me to show up in that, for me to show up and say, this is what's going on inside. When this occurs outside of me, this is how I have a response inside of me. Yeah. Now I can now have a responsibility to either verbalize it, and in my case, I tend to, I do that. I encourage that of my clients as well, as to verbalize what is actually happening, talk through it, journal through it, work through the emotion of it, because the emotions are going to come and go. Mm. But when we start to take responsibility, this is like a radical responsibility, taking responsibility for ourselves and who we are and how we show up and then now we're opening up an opportunity for our partner, for our spouse in any relationship. It doesn't have to be a romantic one, by the way. It's any relationship you have with other, you get to show up in your way and they have an opportunity to respond. And you break down that piece of the codependency of somebody else showing up in a certain way, because that's the attachment. That goes back to, I have to, if he shows up in this way, if he doesn't buy me flowers on Valentine's Day, that means he doesn't love me. Well, that's a lot of crap, first and foremost. But we create these pieces inside of ourselves, inside of those conversations, without actually having the conversation.
Yeah, we that's our silence as well. Like, I mean, I don't think I've ever been one for being silent, but I don't think anyone can ever say that.
I don't think any of us on this panel are.
No, but I know that, like, my codependency in the past and my attachments to people in the past, even when I've not fully been with them, but what I want out of that person isn't available. But I have a story in my head that I hold on to, and I'm like, oh, this would be nice. This will somehow subconsciously heal me, and then everything will be okay, rather than doing the work. And the person that I fell in love with years ago never showed up for me in the way that I wanted. And it was the best gift he could have ever given me. Absolute game changer. And I thank him, and I've thanked him for that. The last time we spoke, which hasn't been for years now, but when we did, and I just was like, thank you so much for never turning up for me in that way, because I found myself because you didn't show up. And that was brilliant. And it was game changing, painful as fuck. So painful. Like, I'm like, oh my God, but it's exactly what I needed. But I didn't know that because I was so hooked on a story, and it was a great story, and he played a role in that story, and he was part of that story, and he had his own version of that story, but it wasn't the right time and it didn't quite work out. But to let go of that, like, to really kind of connect in that way, and to be able to come back and go, not my story, and to let it go. That was powerful for me, because I was like, I can give up my story. And if you can give up your story and you're willing to do that, you can go anywhere. But if you're not willing to give up the story, you're going to be stuck on pages that you don't want to read. It's so bad. Patrick, what's your kind of attachment in terms of, like, your biggest attachment story or little kind of memory of attachment that you can go into from
so it's coming to screaming to the surface just listening to you two speak. My attachment, my codependency showed up as people pleasing. I am such a loving, compassionate, caring person. I want everybody else to be good. I want them to be taken care of. I want all their needs to be, I want them to be supported. And that's how I operated in all my relationships, specifically my romantic relationships. That's how I operated in my marriage. It's like, to the point of my own detriment, I did everything to go out of my way for the other person to be good. And so what happened was, when our marriage, we opened our marriage, so we started seeing other people. And as soon as my wife started seeing somebody else, that destroyed me, because all of my, I had this is only something I realized much, much later, not in the moment. But I had attached all my need for validation, all my security, all my safety, all my love, everything I needed, I had attached to my wife. And so when she started seeing somebody else, that cut that cord. And I was like floundering like a little child. I didn't know how to behave in the world, totally lost, full breakdown. That was probably the lowest point. Actually, no, it got lower than that. But the solution at the time was like, okay, I'll just find myself a girlfriend, and so everything will be fine. And so I did that. I fell in love with somebody else. And what I found, and again, this is only something I discovered in retrospect, I just attached my tether onto her instead. And so my attachment went from one person to the next, and I wasn't healing. I wasn't dealing with any of my shit. I wasn't looking at it. And so that went on as a roller coaster for a couple of years until the point where it's like, this has to stop. I can't continue these patterns, these stories anymore. And I cut all the cords and I just went into myself. And that was the hardest thing to do because I had to be with myself fully, and all my bullshit, all my stories, all my dependency, all my people pleasing, and just witness it. And then, but then, like you said, going into that pain is the opportunity. It is the path to joy, to pleasure, to redemption, to healing, to really go into it. But you have to let yourself feel the pain and look at your own bullshit first, which is why it's so difficult for people to do. And I remember one point, I just was full surrenders, like I can't, like arms wide open, rain pouring down on me in the jungle, like I'm done, like crying my eyes out at the lowest I could have been. But that was like the full surrender to the point where, okay, now I can start rebuilding of who I truly am. And in that moment is an opportunity to build a foundation of who I am and what I am and my purpose in life. And that feels solid. And when you build that up, you can't be knocked over anymore, right?
Love that. And so when you went into the open relationship part, which is super interesting, and I'm going to get you in for another show, basically. You just booked yourself in for a whole other show. So, so
I'll join you on that one too.
There as well, Justin.
Well, we'll talk about that, yeah. But go ahead, stay on your thread.
Cool. So I personally, I've never had that experience. And I remember I listened to this book called Open, which is an incredible book. If anybody's ever seen it on Amazon, get it. It's amazing. However, I'm like books so quickly. This took me 5 months to get through this audiobook because of the way she talked about open relationships. Oh my God, it was so uncomfortable to listen to.
Awful.
But at the same time, my mind was popping open to there was excitement of that level of freedom beyond attachment. So I was thinking, oh, open relationship. Maybe that's what I need to have. Maybe I need to become so free that I don't have emotions anymore. Dick comment, by the way, that's never going to happen. But the idea that was there, like, oh my God, that would be amazing. So I played around with this idea in my head thinking this is what I wanted. And obviously then when you think what you think, things show up in your life. So I got a few opportunities that toyed around with the idea of that. And I was just like, this is the worst idea I've ever had. Like, why would I ever want to do that? But the fascination that I got from the interesting part of being so emotionally free that I could allow my partner to do what the hell they wanted, knowing that I was fully confident that they'd come back to me. Not that they always do come back to you, but this illusion that I had that would be somewhat easier and better. And now I'm like, is that really the path, or is it the real depth of intimacy that we're avoiding? Is that so? I'd love to know kind of your little take up on that, Patrick.
100%. Well, it's both. It's both and, I think. You know, when my wife and I were first discussing, what it would look like, how it would feel, how we would navigate it, there was a lot of excitement, a lot of like freedom, a lot of love, a lot of joy. Compersion is a word that's used in the open community, which is feeling pleasure in your partner's pleasure. So the idea of my wife being with somebody else and getting what she wants and being fully expressed, like that felt great to me on some level until, the actual situation where she was doing it. And then all the ugly jealousy, inadequacy, envy, just the ugly shit starts to come to the surface. So they're both happening at the same time, really. Right. And so, but how you navigate those depths of darkness is real, because you see yourself on the most clear fundamental level when you send your partner off to sleep with somebody else. Like that
and what you're doing on that end too, with all that self-doubt and judgment, and my lover is going to be fed and loved on by someone else. That's not about your partner. It is actually about your relationship with self. Because regardless of, yes, Patrick, you were married, but regardless of that, we have free choice in every friendship and relationship we have. So the idea of having like that fear of, I'm sending my wife off to sleep with another man and she may not come back, that is always existing. Whether or not you're married, whether or not communication is a huge component of that, but that's always part of the equation. So it's funny because poly's is new for me. So I'm not going to go very deep into that because I don't have a lot of depth in there. When it was introduced to me, and it was only introduced to me in the last few months. In fact, Patrick, it was about the time the book was coming out, was when that conversation began. And the individual that really opened me up to the idea of polyamory, when it was shared with me, it was like, you're coming from a place of pure love, right? And it's love of self and love of others. So it comes from, as I understood, it's like, okay, here I am, let's just say I'm in a relationship and in a romantic relationship. My partner is only going to satisfy so many things for me, right? Because I'm going to still have friendships outside of that. I'm going to have other relationships outside of that because I have a best friend who all I want to do with that best friend, the thing I like the most with her is to go for hikes with her. And when we hike and we laugh and we have these big belly laughs, I don't want to necessarily share that with my partner. I want to share that with my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you can sort of translate it in that way, that was how it sort of started to gel and make sense for me. And now having spent a little more time, and I hear my own echo, so you could take me off in a minute because I know it's probably irritating. Having spent time with a couple that's playing with them, and actually watching them interact with others and the joy that they receive, it's not a jealousy. It's, oh my gosh, my wife is being loved on by someone else who wants to love and care and honor for this person. That's what I want to see for my partner.
Yeah.
It's removing yourself from the situation and seeing that other person that way and recognizing it has nothing to do with you. Not that that's easy. It sounds way easier, but practice, way different.
Yeah. So there's like I am going to put you on mute, but it's not very loud echo, but just slightly. But so I get that part of it. Like, you want to have your partner enjoy their life to the nth degree, and that you don't want to hold them back. You don't want to be the jealous one. You want to be able to give them the freedom that they truly deserve, because that's what you want. You want the best for them. And I get that. There's the other side of it though. And I've had in-depth conversation. I lived in Ibiza for a while, so you can imagine how many people enjoy very random conversations and a different style of life, shall we say. So I've had many conversations, always having been the sober one, and everybody else either being on some form of drug or alcohol. So they'll tell you everything. I've had deep conversations around this where some people think that it's that you've just spoken to, and other people who've had a longer period being open, I would say nearly all of them tend to go back to being monogamous, saying that they enjoyed the experience that it gave them and the level of freedom that they could get to. But what they actually realized is they wanted to go deeper with their self, which meant a completely different level of depth on an intimacy level with one other person.
Mm-hmm.
And that fixation, keeping coming back to the point, to the one person, to keep going deeper and to shedding into the one, creates this kind of cosmic conscious connection that you've got, that isn't, the depth is there. Whereas before there was a depth of openness and lovingness, but actual full on intimacy and the depth of what you can go to on a spiritual level and on a kind of a conscious cosmic level was way deeper once they'd come out of their fun playground scenarios and gone into this one-to-one, because it's more of a God. I don't mean this when I say this bad for any polys, but it's been described, it's more godly and it's more serving to them on their spiritual path to be intimate with one person and to keep coming back to that space. But they enjoyed the play around. Does that make sense to you, Patrick? Because I know that you said that it's kind of both in terms of intimacy and the exploration, but what do you think of that?
I 100% agree with what you just said. It's exactly that. There is a level of openness and freedom and fun and sort of titillation in the openness, but that depth of connection and intimacy with self and other, for me, only happens in a monogamous situation. So that it was a fun experiment. I learned a shitload about myself mostly. But I wouldn't consider myself poly whatsoever. I'm monogamous, and primarily because of that reason, the depth of connection and intimacy and spirituality, consciousness that you can explore in a monogamous relationship just doesn't happen in poly situations from my experience.
Yeah. And there's a side that I feel like I know that I have in the past, this is all the codependency and the shame, we'll talk about it. I've got the jealousy t-shirt. I have been the one that's gone down someone's phone because they slept on it and kept it under their pillow. So I was like, something's not quite right here. Let me go and investigate the situation. So I did, and I found out that they were cheating on me, and I was like, damn. So I've been jealous. I've been cheated on by every boyfriend I've ever had. And I have only been cheated on. And I wouldn't say what I did was cheating, because I went out with someone for a day when I was at school, and I snogged someone that night, and I forgot that I'd said yes to having a boyfriend in the day. So, and I was like 15. So I have split up with people and almost immediately got with someone else, like in a very short space of time, because I used to have this mantra, which is really unhealthy. And I've said it before on here, and I said I'd never say it again, but to get over someone, you have to get under someone, because it works quicker. That's what I used to think. Yeah.
It's effective, not necessarily the best route.
Exactly. It's not exactly but it's like basically you're delaying your pain and booking it in for later. Yeah.
Exactly.
But it works in the interim. You're like, yeah, cool. So I've done that a couple of times, but I've never actually cheated on someone, because I couldn't sit with the guilt. Basically, and I talk all the time, so that the lie would just come out at some point. I'd fuck myself up. So I never bothered. And I've never felt that real need to have something fully open, other than when I was playing around with the idea, because for me, what I'm looking for is a depth, and it's a depth that I want to go to with someone. And I want to go to this space where I'm not running away, and neither are they, because I've been really good at running away in the past, and I've had runners as well. So for me, that full intimacy connection's not been there as yet, and I want to go deeper into that. But I already know that I'm a jealous person. So for like, I want to be with someone and say, hey, I'm feeling jealous right now, feel super uncomfortable. Can we work on this? Because it's, otherwise it's going to repeat, rather than being like, yeah, you can sleep with someone and I can just sit with this feeling on my own over here. No, that for me doesn't work. So the idea of openness I don't feel like I need to experience that anymore, because I'm willing to admit I'm already jealous, and I would like to work that out in a different way. Does that make sense?
I have a question for you. Why do you think most of your partners have cheated on you? Have you explored that?
Do you know what? It's really interesting. When I was younger, there was just no sense. I mean, there was just no sense of relationship, really. He still felt very free, even though he didn't want me to be with anyone else. They've also been very controlling and abusive. So I've had that. So pretty much all of them have been physically abusive and things. So I haven't had a partner for a long time, but I have had guys that I've kind of connected with and gone in and learned a lot with, but not on a full, hey, I'm your girlfriend, you're my boyfriend type thing. So I have worked on a lot, but not in that depth. But I don't really know. I don't really know. And I gave them everything. I was totally I half moved in with one when I was younger. I spent a lot of time with another, toying with the idea of getting married. So there was commitment from me. But I don't know. What are you thinking? What's your scenario?
I don't know. It's a worthy inquiry, because often if the same pattern keeps showing up, like you said, you attract abusive, there's a common denominator, and you're it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have worked on the abusive part, in the sense of there was a lot there that I went through. I had no boundaries. I had no understanding of self-love concept, all of that kind of stuff. I was also quite I fought for love, shall we say, because when I was younger, my first ever relationship was extremely abusive and extremely controlling. So we used to speak to each other, because I used to get physically abused. The way I would speak to him, I had no respect for him either. I took that lack of respect into other connections, and I wouldn't speak to them from a loving place. So I think I also inspired the anger and wound them up somewhat. I'm not saying I deserve to get beaten up, but what I'm saying is my terminology and the way that I carried myself, let's not say it was ladylike, because it wasn't. So I didn't offer the best in the beginning. And that's why I went on my own personal journey. I wanted to change my personality, my traits, who I was, who I became. I didn't want to be that version of myself anymore that had to try and defend herself in a loving relationship. That wasn't love to me. when I was reading more about stuff, I was like, oh, I was not in love and not in love in that one. So I knew that what I got was so wrong. I had to work on it. And then I've kind of grown in that sense, in many ways, but it was hard because I didn't understand the concept of love at all. I mean, I got it so wrong, but we're still learning. I'm still here. Still here. Go for it, Jackie.
Yeah, and I wanted to chime in here. My earbuds like decided to disconnect, so here we are. So I'm glad Patrick brought this up, because I also had a curious inquiry about this, and I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about my own journey. So, like, Patrick, you talked a little bit about when your marriage started to dissolve, like when you opened it up, and then you had that moment in the jungle where your arms open wide, just surrendering, right? For me, in the wake of my ending my marriage, because I was one that decided to end it, I spent months and months and months alone. I mean, I changed my diet. I stopped drinking. I turned my phone off for days on end. I'd post on Facebook only to get out whatever it was going, Facebook kind of became my journal, so to speak, rather than journaling. I did journal internally, but I journaled very publicly, and I didn't care at all what anyone else had to say. I spent time with me, purely with me. What was it that made me happy? Because I had forgotten that. When you get into a place of codependency, you rely that on your partner. You rely on your partner to provide the happiness, to provide the joy, to provide the laughs, to provide the activity, all of those things, to a degree, right? We all do it. But when you're a codependent, you really do it. You remove the idea of having love within, and you give that power away to someone else. So it's coming back to, how do I make me happy? I don't want anyone else. I don't need anyone else. That's not true. I want and need other people. But what it comes back to is, how do I self-serve? And how do I love on myself if there really is nobody else out there that's going to love on me and cherish me and take care of me? Because when I start to do that, then your body, I don't know if you guys can, this is how I relate to this. I had felt a lot of emptiness. Like, Patrick, you were talking about, like, you went from, okay, your wife was with someone, and now you're going to find someone to help. And I'll equate that to filling a void, right? I have a lot of voids. I fill that with food. I fill it with relationships. I fill it with friendships. We all have that piece. But when you can fill that from within purely, that shifts how you feel about yourself. And I say that like really, what woo-woo-ish, yet I experienced it. Like, have you guys read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle?
Yeah.
I'm sure you have, right? It's a Bible. That when he's talking about sitting on the bench and just observing the world and that fullness that he felt within him, I experienced that for 2 years. That I didn't want to. I remember like not really wanting a lot of people around me, because they start to like impinge on my joy that I have for myself. I was okay to sit for hours and hours on end in silence, not even having the TV on, no music, nothing, just being with me. And like, to the point, like at night I lay in bed, that fully open outstretched arms, because if I put my arms by my side, it was like, I can't do it. It was painful, because I knew that my energetic being was pushing beyond my physical being. And then from there, when you have that fullness, that's where you can truly meet someone else, if they're also in that space. And that's where you can have those difficult conversations, where you have those moments of doubt or lack or feeling unloved or whatever. Just say, no, I'm okay with me. It doesn't really matter what you say or do, because at the end of the day, I know who I am. I know where I am. I know where I'm loved. And it's a fluid. It's not a permanent state. I wished it was. I had it for 2 years. It was amazing. And then the shadow came back.
But that's
That one's
the thing. It's like I've met some, having spent a lot of time on my own, been 12 years almost. Well, it actually has now over 12 years. But like I've given up the drugs, given up the alcohol, went into the silence, done the meditations, done my ayahuasca, done my mushrooms, so all of these things, and they're all amazing for me, and it's helped me build up myself. I know now more than ever when I've met other people, where I've met them, I've been honest and we've connected, and either it hasn't worked out, but I don't jump into relationships. What I jump into is connections. I'm happy. I'm all into a connection, but it doesn't have to be defined as a relationship straight away. And I'm happy to see what it is and see where it goes and how it grows. And then I very clearly know that I'm not over promising, and they're not, promising me anything they can't deliver, but we're just sharing time. And I've done that with a number of guys, and none of them whom I don't speak to anymore. Like I'm still friends with them all, but it just hasn't gone into, apart from one of them, but that's, he doesn't speak to me, but hey, what can you do? But the idea is like, connecting on a level where I don't want to be this way, like, we never speak again, because that's just a shame. For me, I'd rather just be collecting friends. And even if I never had a boyfriend again, I've collected some great guys and I know that they exist. So any girl out there saying all guys are dicks, they're not. It's the way that you look at them. It's not that all guys are dicks. But it's, for me, there's like this thing that the codependency, one of my friends said this to me a while ago, is that when people say, oh, I don't want anyone and I don't need anyone, I do want someone. And I do need someone, and I'm okay with needing someone. I didn't used to be. I wanted to do it all on my own and be like super successful all on my own and independent. And I'm like, that's fucking boring and lonely. Like, that's just a dick move, right? That's not the way you want to go. I do want someone, and I am open to meeting someone. I mean, it's not helping right now with a corona, but my faith in men and good guys and my relationship hasn't died because the world's got a virus. I'm very open to the idea that that can still happen in any way. But I think it's a perception thing. It's like, for, looking at the codependency, I know now that where I'm at, I'm in a really good place. But until I'm into a relationship with someone else, I can't say that I'm over codependency, because I don't know if it's going to come up. So I can't be in that illusion as well. It's like, I'm willing to admit that right now I have a t-shirt of being successfully single for 12 years. Can't put on there that I'm over codependency, because it might come up, which is the bit that I'm excited for. Because if it does, I've now got the language to be able to handle that.
And the self-awareness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm now able to have that conversation.
And I think it's fluid. I don't think it's like a one and done that you check it off and you're like, oh, I'm no longer a codependent. We were designed to be alone. I mean, if you look back historically how civilization began, we raised our children in community. We didn't raise them in this home where no one else is allowed to come in and out except for your nuclear family, right? We were meant to to work with others, right? I have a skill and talent where I can make the best bread, and Patrick can I don't know, cook the best corn, and that you set a beautiful table. These are all the pieces that we bring in together to create this beautiful opportunity where we share and we coexist. We're meant to. We were designed that way. So I hear you too, because I kind of question it too. Like, I'm newer into the poly arena, and I'm also like, when is this going to, I mean, for me, I'm looking at it as a way to break myself up from the idea of codependency, of depending on one other person. Because I will tell you, like, there is someone that I see on occasion, and every time, like, this person and I part ways, I have to check myself. I pull my energy back into myself and say, okay, this is weird. I want this person to be here, but this is the agreement that we have, and I'm wanting this other piece from this person, but this experience we just had was so beautiful that I'm okay with this experience. And if I see this person again, it's going to be a beautiful experience, probably. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Most usually it is. If I don't, I know that if this is the last time I speak to this person, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the moment that I was in it, and I enjoyed it for what it was. And that's something that I got caught up in my last relationship with. And we were in a monogamous relationship for a year, and every time we had to go our separate ways for work, for the day, just to live our lives. I was like, in the beginning, I remember being like, there was a safety in knowing that I'm okay with this experience. If this is the last time. As time wore on, and we became deeper in our connection, I started to find my insecurities coming back up. We haven't made plans for the next time we're going to get together. And that started to grow and grow and grow. And that got the attention. So you talk about like, the law of attraction, like that, those were things that were getting the attention. The lack was getting the attention, not the abundance. And as the lack continued to grow, the division between the two of us continued to grow. Because I started saying, oh my gosh, he's not going to come around for this. Oh, I want him to be here. And I wanted him to check this box for me. That codependency stuff came back hard.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's just like it'll creep up whether it wants to, doesn't it? Patrick, I was going to ask you, like, in terms of like relationships and kind of making plans. I know you've got background noise, but I'm sure we can.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's all right. Don't worry. It's like, I think when I've never had a relationship where we've made plans in the future for like long term, apart from when I was younger, and it was really kind of like quite stagnant. But when you make plans for someone in the future, that shows a level of commitment.
For
but
sure.
if do you think it's the plans and the ideas that we get attached to, or do you think it's always the person? Because sometimes I think it could be both.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's both. There's a certain level, first I just want to say, how many people, like we're talking about this wholeness, being by yourself and doing that healing, how many people actually enter a relationship from that place of wholeness? Very, very few. Right?
Very few.
So dependency and codependency and jealousy and all that shit is just built into almost every relationship. So if you are talking about two people that are coming from wholeness and you're making plans together, that's amazing. But for me, making plans for me was like, there's a certain sense of safety in it, certain sense of comfort and reliability and intimacy and trust. Those are all things that we crave as human beings. And so being married and knowing that I'm in a solid situation, there's a certain sense of freedom in that, like freedom that you don't find in a poly situation. It's a different kind of freedom. Like now, okay, I've got.
Can I ask you on that though, Patrick? Because is that truly it? That it's freedom, or is it that you're allowing yourself to settle down and not be so concerned about your partner being with somebody else? Because in poly, you have that constant. My partner may be with other people, right? Where in a marital situation or in a monogamous situation, this is what we've been programmed to believe, and I'm not saying that I don't believe in it, because I do, but just for a question of curiosity here, is it that we really feel safer? Are we giving ourselves that feeling of feeling safer because we believe that other person's going to be there, and so we're like settling in and saying, oh, I don't have to worry about whether my relationship is solid or not, because that person's going to be here because we made this commitment.
Yeah, well, it's both. And I think they're just a different definition of freedom. That is a different form of freedom, to know that your partner is always going to be there for you. And that's a rock solid foundation if it comes from a place of wholeness and not codependency, right? Which my relationship in many ways did. Like, we love each other. I don't use the word divorce because we're separated physically, but we still love each other deeply. And I see her every day almost. And it's amazing. I feel so grateful for that. We still have that relationship. It was more about recognizing that we were growing in different directions and allowing each other the space to do that. And that's a beautiful act of love. Like I wrote in the chapter for Jocelyn's book, our book, that's what I view my relationship. I don't even call her my ex-wife. Like, she's still my wife. So
oh, that's so cute.
It is beautiful, and it's beautiful, and I'm so grateful for that. And my kids have been witness to the whole thing, and we've been completely transparent with them about the whole thing. When there were other people in our lives, it wasn't like, oh, mommy's got to do this and daddy's doing this. It's like, no, there's just more love. Like, this is just mommy's bringing another person that loves her and by extension loves you into our family. It's just it's a different model of family.
And it's such a beautiful space where you can graduate to that. And I think it's something that, because I too have, even though I don't even know how to call, I actually refer to him as my son's father, because I don't like the word ex. To me just is very abrasive. Yeah, he's my son's father, and we both love on him dearly. So just to bring in, like, last night as an example, I had a flood in the basement last night, so that's why I keep getting muted, because I have sump pumps and other things going on in the background, as well as my 6-year-old running in and out of the room. But I reached out to him sort of in a panic. I was like, I've got, like, can you make some calls for something? I asked him for a triage. He drove over here last night just to be with us, to settle my son, so that I could take care of the things I needed to take care of. And so we have this fluidity. And yes, he's been in a relationship, I think, and it's weird. He's like, can I talk to you about this? Because he's not quite where I'm at. I'm like, yes, we can, and I'm okay with talking about it. And in fact, I'd like to meet her, and not because I'm worried about who she is around our child, because I know you'll handle that. I want to meet the person that wants to love on you, because there is still love there for you. I still care for you, and you care for our child. And when you're happier, then our child gets more of you. We all get more of you when you're open and happy. So yes, I actually want this, and it's such a beautiful place if you can graduate that. But we get ourselves caught in this piece of, and we haven't even talked really about shame, but like there's a shame in there. Like people don't want to be like, you're supposed to have this aggression against your former partner who destroyed your life. No. Why? What is that serving? Who is that serving?
No.
How is that serving? So like, get away from that, walking back from it. Go ahead, Nat. Like, yeah. Oh, were you going to say something? You sound like you were about to jump in.
No, but go on, Patrick. Do you have something to say?
Well, I think the idea of shame, and what I was going to say earlier, is the institution of marriage. Like you were saying, Jocelyn, you're entering a relationship where expecting the other person to fulfill all of your needs on every level, from safety, from intimacy, from finances, all of it, and that's so unrealistic. And it's no wonder that the breakdown of marriage, like the divorce rate, is skyrocketing all across the world. It's unrealistic for that to be. And then there's shame attached to it if it does break down. It's really a disaster. It's a breakdown of society. But from a codependence perspective, like we are hardwired to be loving and caring towards our family and the people around us, right? And so if you are in a codependent relationship, and codependency can show up as like if you're enabling addiction, for example, if your partner's an alcoholic or depressive or abusive, and you're allowing it to happen, that's a codependent relationship. But where is that line between, okay, so I'm caring and loving on you, I want to support you through this difficult time, and between that and enabling them to allow them to do it, And so a lot of people say, well, it's tough love. If they're alcoholic or they're addicted or something, you just got to cut them off, and they should, deal with it on their own. But that's counterintuitive to our nature to do that. So that's a question I wanted to ask you guys. Where is that line between enabling and codependency, or what would be the opposite? You're enabling them or tough love?
I think the line is drawn with the communication. So
right.
There isn't a line, and this is why we find it so hard. There's a level of communication that needs to be reached in order to make that support healthy. And if it's not healthy and it's not dealt with correctly from the right level of communication, it becomes really unhealthy. And if the boundaries aren't set, which is a form of communication, if the respect isn't there, which is a form of communication as well,
right.
if the trust isn't there, which is a form of communication, the line's all over the place. Like there is no line.
There is no line.
I think it's moved through with the openness of having a conversation, and that's where you've got to be willing to talk about your shame, because the shame is there. And you want to support your partner tremendously, which I know we're running out at the end of time, but it's fine, we'll go for a few minutes. You might want to support your partner in some way, but you are ashamed because everybody else thinks that you should leave them, because that's what they would do. But you have a level of love within you where you want to stick around and support them for friends reason, or for hope that it can be solved reason. So there's shame around leaving. There's shame around being the person that's in that situation, about the alcoholism. And there's also a shame, within yourself about, being disrespected if you do stay with someone that is clearly, not respecting you or not honoring the agreement that they originally said that they'd agree. So there's so many areas to go into, but I think there is no line. I think it's the line that you draw with communication and how you handle every single step of the conversation.
I want to add to that. What the word that came through for me was compassion around that. For compassion for self and compassion for other. I agree with you, Nat, with the communication piece, but the compassion component of it, and I'll actually give you a clear example of this to kind of play through it. So I have a younger brother who is bipolar. And he had his mental breakdown actually in Colorado many years ago. And since that time, he's gone through a lot of tribulations where he's been in and out of jail, in and out of mental hospitals. And now my parents and myself, included, I'm not even going to talk about my parents, but myself, I've allowed him to fall down many times over. Do I have the ability to pick him back up and hold him and care and love on him and not allow that? Yes, of course I do. But I have compassion for myself, saying, no, this is not my lesson. It is not my lesson. I can love on you and not have and allow you to have to learn that hard lesson for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds really harsh because there is shame in that, right? There's absolute shame in that. How could you allow your child, your someone you care about and love, go off to have to deal with the repercussions of his actions? Well, I have to because it's my responsibility to take care of me first. And it's his responsibility to have to weave through this. And yes, it's a little bit of tough love. It's not like I'm cutting them off from communication. It's just a matter of, this is where I'm going to allow myself to be a part of it, and this is where I'm not. Mm-hmm. So compassion, I think, is a part of that play.
Good point.
Yeah.
So we are just at the end of our show. We haven't really covered shame. We've gone into all sorts of things and open relationships, which I love, which is definitely a conversation I love having. It's one of the most awkward ones out there, I think, about that. And it's really, some people daren't even have that conversation, let alone dip their toe into that kind of pool of openness, which I find really interesting, because people always squirm and start moving around and stroking their hair and just avoid the conversation.
And there's shame in that, right? I mean, yeah. Patrick and I have played in it, right? And I say that mine, I can't speak to Patrick's, but mine's very, very new and very light. But I will even tell you, there's some ideas in my own background of shame around it. I'm like, am I actually respecting myself in this situation? Am I actually respecting my needs and my desires in this situation, or am I allowing myself to be utilized in a way that I don't like? Yeah. And I get to make that decision in every single experience.
Yeah, and it's a deeper one that you've got to go on, I guess. But yeah, that's a whole other show. That is a whole other show. But guys, I want to say thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it. And all the information about where you two can be found is underneath on the description. So anybody that's going to be watching this afterwards, I don't really promote them beforehand other than just dropping them a Telegram, but usually they're watched afterwards more. I just like to go live because it just means it's more real, even if no one's ever watching. I'm just like, let's go live because it's more fun. But it's, I really like having these conversations. I know we've got you back. Is it next week, Patrick?
I'm not sure.
No, I don't know if it's week. It's a Tuesday.
Okay.
It's a Tuesday.
I'll be there.
Yeah, perfect. There you go. I'll just send you the diary invite. But I really appreciate it. Have you got anything you want to add or say before you guys leave? And anything else?
I would just want to touch on something we didn't go into, which is generational patterns. Jocelyn mentioned it earlier, but a lot of these behaviors that we're talking about are learned and inherited. And so it becomes our responsibility to identify them. And in that it comes a great power and responsibility to change them. And that is so powerful and so needed in this world, is to let's identify what isn't working within ourselves and within our family and change that. And that's how we change the world. So
it's inside first. It's inside
first. Yeah.
Indeed.
I'm going to just touch on that, and to wrap this up for Patrick, what Patrick said, I'm going to go with keep shedding your skin. Keep allowing yourself to shed and grow, and just trust that you are being provided for all the time. This is something literally that on my tea bag yesterday. I'm going to read this from you. This is not the one. Sorry. Oh no, where'd it go? But shoot, now I can't find it. It was here just a minute ago, but now it's gone. Here it is. Let things come to you.
Yeah.
Stop chasing our dreams so hard. Allow and surrender and let things come to you. Shed and allow.
Yeah. I make that. Shed and allow. It makes so much sense. Well, thank you so much. I literally thought that this morning. Somebody said to me, why don't you go on a dating app? And I'm like, the universe knows where I live. If my guy's coming, he's coming. He'll drop me a text or an email and say, hi, digital date right here. But there's no way I'm jumping on an app trying to manipulate my love life. I'm just not down with it. So that was I didn't need a tea bag to tell me that, just in my mind. But thank you so much. If everybody, you guys stay there, but everybody else who's at home, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow. I have no idea what's on tomorrow. I should know this stuff. Hold on. Okay, I should know what I've got planned every week, but I just don't. I'm just the poor host today. I don't have an admin person. That's why. Let's have a look. Need an assistant. Oh, prison life tomorrow. We're talking. There's a woman from the States who does amazing work in prisons. So we're going to be talking to her, going into that and the kind of magical work that she's doing there. There's some really raw stuff, which I think is a great area to work in. So you guys stay there. Everybody else at home, thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.